All righty. Okay, we're recorded. Um, so I think the thing I wanted to talk about today, Bill, and it was more a topic area rather than just something specific that I've read, but it was around people focusing, like shifting their attention from the things that are happening outside of themselves to themselves. And it's been coming up recently, like in coaching sessions I've had. And I just think with the world the way it is, I think if more people were to shift their energy and attention to within themselves, they would see a great impact in how they feel, think, and act. I wanted to start off today by asking you, what impact do you feel that it would have if people could shift their energy and attention to focus within?
It greatly speeds up actual learning. If they're just focused externally, which our culture has made it easy to do, now we've got people who are, most of the time, there's more than one screen in their vicinity. They've got their phone they look at quite frequently, and sometimes they have a computer screen or a TV set or both. So there's a lot of interruptive, distractive stuff going on. And so our mind's sucked out into the senses, the five physical senses, what we see, hear, and to a lesser extent, feel, touch, and smell, and taste. That keeps us from learning things, because learning, we have to have a perspective on what do we want? What do we think? What do we feel? What's going on inside? Why are we drawn to look at this screen now rather than that screen? What's behind it all in terms of our own motivations? And why do we care about those things? What made us care about those things? Is it the real me that cares about those things? Or have I been conditioned by other people to pay attention to those things? So I have to be up on those topics for conversation. If somebody asks me, did you see that play in the Super Bowl? Gee, I have to watch the Super Bowl, or I won't be able to answer that question. All of that went on thousands of years ago, because we know that because it was noticed by philosophers thousands of years ago that the senses took over everything inside of us, and we lost track of ourselves. And you go back thousands of years, and it's recorded in some of the earliest scriptures from India, for example, Greek philosophy. It goes way back, and it's much worse now than it was then, the distractive environment. So when we do go inside, and you see this happening, people are coming in touch with this through, for example, psychedelic drugs, whether it's grass or ketamine or LSD or whatever it is. There's this experimentation going on, and what it does is it brings people inside, and they don't need the drugs to go inside, but the drugs force them inside, and it breaks a long-running habit of being so outwardly focused. But if you just set aside some time each day, if you have a ritual of, whether it's in the morning or the evening or both, to just be alone, an alone space. And in that alone space, you don't have any distractions. And you're able to just focus on, gee, how do I feel? Why do I feel that way? How's my life going? Where am I going anyway? Where's this all leading? What do I want? Is that me who wants that, or is that pumped into me? Those kinds of things, you need some alone space every day if you're going to try to break away from the being sucked in constantly to distractive things that aren't you, that aren't about you, and aren't helping you to find out who you really are. They're not unlocking the inner genius, the creativity that you have, your gifts. All of that stuff is laying dormant under this culturally imposed barrage of impressions.
Mhm. Yeah, that's interesting, and I do agree that time by yourself or for yourself is really, really important. Whether it's, you know, going for a walk, going for a run, a swim, however you get your time. I think. Well, I know for me, if I don't get it, it starts to trip me down a bad negative, you know, mind spiral. I I believe like one of the main barriers that stop people doing that is I think a lot of people are actually very uncomfortable in their own, either in their own company or in their own headspace. What are your thoughts on that?
That's a very good observation. I know I remember one guy was a terrific copywriter, advertising copywriter, award-winning copywriter, a brilliant guy, tremendous sense of humor, a great writer in, you know, whether he was writing a novel or a script or, you know, whatever. And when we had conversations about my book, Mind Magic, for example, he would express fear of being alone with himself. And when I probed gently what that fear was, some of it was fear of going crazy.
Mm.
that he could actually make himself crazy if he did some of the things that I was talking about. And I have no evidence whatsoever that I've driven anyone crazy except maybe my mother, but that was a long time ago. I don't think I've actually driven anyone crazy with any of my suggestions about going inside, but there's a real fear there. And um, there's also a fear of maybe there's nothing there. Maybe there is no me. Maybe I am just, you know, picking up and reflecting all this other stuff. How do I know that I'm going to find a me in there?
Mhm.
And maybe the me in there is that, you know, evil shadow self that Jung talks about. You know, my worst fears might come true, that I'm actually not a good person. I
Mm.
don't want to find that out. I mean, those are, I think, some of the more maybe surface levels of the fear. And then I think there's like a nameless dread of the unknown.
Mm.
And you know, we don't know a lot about consciousness, and we don't try to know a lot about it. It confuses us when we try to think about it.
Mhm.
It's just so much we don't know about it. It's just easier to just get on with it, get on with life, and take it for granted, and not get into these things.
Mhm.
But I think that courage to meet yourself and looking at it from a positive perspective of what are the benefits of doing this? Well, the benefits are it's possible we're going to find some real reservoir of strength within,
Mm.
and peace and calm and confidence, and being able to be resilient to whatever happens, to
Mhm.
not be so fearful of bad outcomes. You
Mhm.
know, okay, you know, I'm prepared for bad outcomes. I'm prepared for good outcomes. Um, I even recognize that I'm bringing on these bad outcomes by dwelling on them. I see it
Mhm.
happening. I'm sabotaging myself by spending all this time worrying. Instead of that, why don't I spend some time figuring out how to fix all this stuff?
Mhm.
It's much more constructive than worrying. So I'd say that the values of doing it need to be promoted. We need to communicate, make people aware of the positive side. And when they see that there's so much positive about it, and they see people doing it, like we're doing it now, we're just talking to each other. We have no prepared script. We're just spontaneously exchanging ideas with each other. That's something they can do with themselves. They
Mhm.
can spontaneously exchange ideas with themselves.
Mhm.
There's a lot of, they'll find that they have a lot of thoughtfulness and complexity, and they can look at two sides of an issue, and they can be open-minded, and they can reopen old drawers that they've kept locked.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think Because reflecting just even on my own journey, like I think society makes it in a way that you don't really have to have that time of introspection. So it's like when I think of my own journey, it's like, okay, you go to school, you're there, you go home and you're with your parents or your siblings, and then you go to university and you're around people, and then, and then for me, it's like, like many others, you find a partner, and then you're with a partner, and then you buy the house and you get married and you do all those things. And then before you know it, and then you've got your own kids, and and before you know it, people don't really get that break until they're, in their 50s maybe, and their kids have grown up, right? And like, I'm laughing, but it's actually quite disturbing, isn't it, that like you could go through that amount of years of your life and not have any of that time to reflect and to figure out, or to get to know yourself. And I've heard it, like people are uncomfortable spending periods of time by themselves. It's like, oh, my other half's away on a work trip, I'll need to fill my diary or my calendar, and it's kind of a shame, because as you've said, it's almost that it's that fear. And when you were talking there, it made me think of, growth is uncomfortable, and it's not actually that there's anything to fear. I just think the discomfort is something that a lot of people will choose not to have. If they have the option of feeling comfortable, they're around people, they don't need to think. I think we're hardwired to seek that comfort rather than being by yourself, which might be uncomfortable to some.
It's a good analysis, and I think that people find themselves bored when they're alone. So it's like they're bored with themselves, but they're only bored with themselves because they have had no practice learning themselves. And once they start to break out of that, they find their own company quite enjoyable. And particularly, you talk about taking walks in nature, and there's beauty and splendor and awe and wonder all around them. They're looking up at the stars at night, just smelling the coffee, taking the time, smell the roses, whatever metaphor you want to use. Just enjoy the present moment. And if they just walk around in nature and enjoy that, thoughts will arise that wouldn't normally arise. And they won't have put any effort into it. They won't be, trying to contact themselves. It'll just happen. They don't have to put any effort into it. All they have to do is be present, pay attention. If they have a thought, pay attention to it. Where did the thought come from? Why did I think that right just at that moment? What does it mean? Is it important, unimportant? So, when you have the leisure moment to think that way, and you're not being rushed by the to-do list and all the assignments you and the universe have given you at the moment, and you're just taking a break from all of that, it kind of does itself. You just have to make room for it.
Yeah, that's interesting. It will do it by itself. You just need to create the room or the space. Yeah, when you said there, people about getting bored, it kind of highlighted to me a saying that somebody once said. It's like, only boring people get bored. Like, and it's because, as you say, they almost need to get past that stage of, oh, this is boring and uncomfortable, and like let those thoughts come in. I guess shifting that energy, because thinking about the outside world, and I think the outside world being things that are happening on the news, or things that are happening at work, or something that somebody said to you that really pissed you off, right? But those things, people tend to put a lot of energy into those kind of things, like rather than themselves. I guess how can, I'm hearing spending time by yourself, but how can they start to shift that? Because I think a lot of people are so caught up in it, they don't know how to switch off. So what is something tangible they can actually start to do to shift their energy? One, notice that they're putting their energy outside of themselves, but two, then shift it.
I think that the most productive and fun way, the easiest way to get into it is to set time aside to have a happy daydream of the rest of your life.
Mm.
You know, to forget what's possible and impossible, forget what you think is impossible, what people have told you is impossible, and just imagine if anything were possible, how would the movie of the rest of your life play out? What would you be doing this year? What would you be doing next year? What would you be doing the year after that? Where's it all going to go with the happy ending? Not don't edit it based on, oh, but that's not possible. You can do that later. For now, just let it rip. What's the best? And that turns out to be a lot of fun. It's just like daydreaming. And of course, the more you visualize the positive outcomes that are your heart's desire, your innermost dream that you won't even share with yourself anymore. And you start to take that seriously as a framework for making decisions that, yeah, I just had this happy daydream. Maybe the odds against that exact dream happening are very, very high, but some version of it, I think I could make that happen. Some version of that. But if I shoot for that, and then I get 80% of it or 20% of it, I'm better off than forgetting I had that as my dream come true. So I think that it's good work to do that, but it isn't work. It's fun. It's a daydream. Isn't daydreaming fun?
We have this coaching question that we use like a lot of the time, and it's like, if you had a magic wand, what would you do? And it sounds very similar to what you're suggesting people start to do.
Yes. It's, and there's other things you can do, but I'd start there. The magic wand too. But I was thinking of people you love and things you love. Just taking that. So if you're bored, here I am alone. I'm doing this because somebody advised me to do it, but I hate it. And I can't even turn on my favorite music unless, you can have background music as long as there isn't lyrics. If you have music in the background, that's okay. As long as, heavy metal probably isn't too conducive, but, some kind of gentle background music without lyrics isn't going to distract you. That's fine. You can do that. But at any rate, if you get bored and you've already done the thing about pre-dreaming the future that you want, what else can you do to de-bore yourself? Well, one thing you could do is just take a moment to acknowledge, who are the people I really love? And what are the other things that aren't people that I really love? And just think about those things that the love that you have and the love in your life. That's another way to kill time. That's very productive, that benefits you and benefits the world. Also, there's people have all of these fears and worries. They actually have the capability of coming up with solutions. So if they get bored, they can make a list of all the things that they're scared of or worry them, and then take the list and put it aside and take a blank sheet of paper and just take one of those things. The problem I feel like working on right now is this one. I don't really feel like working on any of them, but you told me I should do this, so okay, I'll try it. And this is the one I feel like working on. I have a blank sheet of paper. The list I made is not in sight. It's not going to distract me. Yeah, I'm just staring at this blank sheet of paper and I'm worried about X. So what can I do about it? Where's my leverage? I must have some power in the situation that I'm not using. Or why am I going through this experience? Is it possible that the universe feels that I need to learn something out of this? Is this like not really a punishment, but a learning opportunity? Maybe if I look, what can I learn from this? And how can I flow with this more easily, and as opposed to resisting it? How can I approach it rather than avoiding it? How can I engage with it? Do I have the courage to do that? Sure, I can muster the courage to do that, at least while I'm sitting here alone contemplating. So they can solve problems. They can use the time to solve problems, but they have to focus on one at a time. If the whole flood of them come up, fine, then it's time to list them. But then between times of listing, get the list out of sight and take one and work on one.
Yeah, it's the small steps, because if you start that and write everything down, like, it could feel quite overwhelming. I know, even just as you're talking, I'm thinking about in business, right? There's so much I want to do for the business. It's like, you want to do this, you want to do that, you want to do everything like yesterday, but actually it's not conducive to overwhelm yourself, because then it feels too big and like it's not achievable. So it's like chunking it down and taking one step at a time. I think the urge for people, if they get that time, is it's very easy just to turn the TV on. That is almost easier than doing this and sitting there without your phone. And I think about phones now as well. And if I get on like the tube, or you get on any mode of public transport, like, you will see every single head is down, like, it's in your phone. And it's almost like it's a pacifier for people, just because they literally couldn't sit on a train and just sit there for 15 minutes. It's like so uncomfortable. So I think in the times in the past where we may have been forced to have those breaks, we don't anymore, even on an airplane. And I've been guilty of that. I'm like, oh, I'll just look at my phone and I'll look at old photos. There's not even any Wi-Fi, so it's almost like it's become this pacifier for adults. Yeah. Would you agree?
No question about it. It is addictive. And we're prone to addictions, whether it's sugar or tobacco or alcohol or whatever it might be. We're very addictive, and it's easy. I mean, our brains are wired to be social. Our brains are wired to be addictive. We've got eyesight, we've got hearing, we've got touch, taste, and smell. We've got all of these delightful things, and they tend to overwhelm us. They capture our attention. They're interesting. We don't find ourselves interesting. But we could, given half a chance, everyone can find themselves extremely interesting. And then they start to go too far in that direction and become narcissistic. But, we do have these awful tendencies which have been magnified by our culture. And, but we do have these solution directions. And more people are trying them out. When, in the 1960s, there were, maybe 6% of the population would think about meditating occasionally, knew what the word meant. Now it's, maybe 30% actually do it every now and then, or thinking about doing it.
Mhm.
or actually are doing it every day, but that's, a small chunk of the 30%. But at any rate, it's movement in the right direction. And I think even out of bad things, good things happen, like the pandemic got a lot of people to think about, why do I do this? Why am I doing this work I don't like?
Mhm.
Why am I doing this? I mean, I'm not going to live forever.
Mm.
And I still have enough pep in me to do something with my life. Why don't I do something with it?
Yeah.
Something I'd actually enjoy. And that would be taking risks. Yeah, but I'm taking risks by being at this job. Look at all the layoffs. Am I
Yeah.
going to be next? Am
Mhm.
I not taking a risk by just sitting here and doing my job and then, pink slip? Why don't I take, a little bit more risk and try to reach for the stars a little bit?
Mhm.
So I think a lot of that arose out of the pandemic.
Mhm.
There's millions of people thinking about that who wouldn't have been thinking about it without the pandemic. That's a good thing.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I think there's a lot of people that are very risk averse, and I'm maybe of the other extreme. But I think even if you're averse to big risk, like small on like things that aren't, you know, don't necessarily matter. It's not life and death, and or it might feel like it, but it's not. And it reminds me of a book I was reading actually, and it was talking about decisions, and it said that we put as there's two kind of decisions, like thinking of a door, right? There's a decision where you open the door, you walk through, you don't like what you see, and you can walk back through the door, right? There's those kind of decisions that are two-way. Or there's the decisions where you walk through the door shuts behind you, and you can't walk back, right? And it talked about we put the same level of thinking into those shut door kind of scenarios as we do for the two-way decision, the two-way kind of door, if you like. So if we didn't put as much weight into those kind of decisions or risks, or however you want to call it, frame it, um, because there's actually nothing to fear. You can walk in the door and you can walk back out of it. You know, I guess an example of the one-way decision would be having a child, right? Once you have a child, you can't, the door's shut behind you essentially. So I guess it made me think of that and relating that to risk. If people thought about it and were like, well, what if I don't like it? Is this door can I walk back the way? I think that would maybe help people not put so much energy into what could go wrong, what could happen. Like, can you walk back through the door? Yes. So it
Yeah,
might, yeah.
I think that's a good observation. Um, the brain does work that way. It does, the way the brain processes big decisions and small decisions, it goes through the same exact steps. The same parts of the brain are doing the same things, whether you're talking about buying a house or a pack of chewing gum. And neuroscience has recently validated that. Um, yeah, I think getting people to try things that are impermanent, that seem like they're risking a lot, but they're really only risking a little bit of time. And when you look at how much time people invest in escapism, whether it's watching television or reading newspapers or online newspapers or whatever it is, they would rather do that. It's more relaxing. There's less cognitive load and so on. But it's also very relaxing to meditate. It's also very relaxing to do like hatha yoga while you're meditating, stretching the body and letting the mind do whatever it wants, as long as you keep paying attention and observing what it's doing
Mhm.
and figuring out why it's doing that, and whether it's reflecting your true self or just stuff you heard, whether it's the real you or just hearsay,
Mhm.
whether there's real evidence involved, whether, whatever the mind wants to do, makes sense from a certain point of view if
Mhm.
it's positive or at least neutral.
Mhm. Mhm.
The only harm comes when one dwells in a negative way for any length of time, because then you're programming the world against yourself. You're programming yourself against yourself.
Mhm. Mhm.
You know, it's okay when you're solving problems to focus on what the problem is and how you're going to solve it from a constructive, positive, courageous point of view with a degree of resolution and self-admiration, self-trust that, look, if I put all my attention on this, can I make the situation at least a little better? Yeah, I know I can do that. Why don't
Mhm.
I do that?
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. It's like that, having that solution focused mindset, right? It's, if you seek problems, that's what you'll find. If you seek the solutions, you'll find that. And again, it all takes energy. And wouldn't you rather put your energy into the solution rather than the, you know, the
Following.
yeah, yeah, exactly. I know people have say that to me now. They're like, Natalie, I preferred you when before you got into all this coaching stuff. You know, you're not even bitch about anything anymore. You know, it's like, yeah, no, sorry, like it's just, yeah, it's wasted energy. Really, it's wasted energy. But I do think like that reframing, spending time by yourself, you know, when people will say, oh, what have you been up to this weekend, and they go, oh, nothing much, right? And it's like, well, actually you could probably reframe that, like, or that people feel bad because they've been lazy for the day, like if they've just sat at home and not done anything. But actually, if you could reframe that, like, you know, well, actually you were recharging, you were replenishing yourself, you were rediscovering yourself, you were, there's all these things you can be doing when you're doing nothing. You know, your brain is going, and yeah, doing nothing is productive. If you like, it can be productive,
Very productive, yeah.
depending on how you're spending that time.
And then there is this social matter of people asking you, you know, what were you doing?
Hmm.
And how you describe it is a great question,
Hmm.
because um, there is, as you say, risk perceived in everything, even though the perception of it is much greater. You know, we've blown up the idea of risk so that it's a boogeyman, as opposed to, gee, what am I actually risking? A little bit of time, maybe. At any rate, how how would you answer the question? Um, you could say, I've been figuring out how I'm going to achieve my life's plan, and
Hmm.
then, you know, laugh about it, self-deprecatingly, but meaning that that's what you were doing.
Hmm.
Trying to spend the whole weekend trying to figure out, because there have been, you know, a few obstacles along the way to where I want to be, what I want to do, what I want to contribute to the world.
Hmm.
Now, need time to figure them out. So I spent the weekend. I made a little progress.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, it's a reframe, isn't it? And I you know, with obviously coaching is, you know, it's all about looking at things differently and seeing a different perspective. And it was actually a fellow coach had talked about a diamond, almost like a, you know, when you imagine a diamond, it's like when you see it from one angle, it looks a certain way, then you turn it and it gleams a little differently, or you might see a different yeah, you might see a different like shape or perspective. And since hearing that, it's really kind of stuck with me, because it's all about changing the diamond, or the way, you know, just turn it a different angle. And I think that's like anything. When you say, oh, I did nothing at the weekend, well, can you flip the diamond? Can you see it another way? um a way that's more, you know, yeah, more inspiring, more like more uplifting, something that gets you a bit more motivated than going, no, I did nothing, you know?
Exactly.
Hmm.
Exactly. Valuing the way you spend your time valuing yourself, taking yourself seriously enough, and also with a sense of humor,
Mm-hmm.
to, as you say, reframing, changing perspective, putting things in other language, putting
Mm-hmm.
things through, looking at things through other lenses.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's really what coaching is all about.
Mm-hmm.
That's what psychotherapy is all about.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Coaching, in the old sense of team coaches, sports
Mm-hmm.
coaches, um, they're also trying to communicate in ways that break through. You can't break through, but just by saying old and tired phrases that everyone's already heard.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't cause any kind of change. You do have to surprise the mind.
Mm-hmm.
The brain produces a thing called the P300 wave, and the P300 wave is a sign that conscious attention has occurred, that a question has arisen, that a surprise has happened, something deviated from the mind's model of what was going to happen, and that got the attention and caused the P300 wave. The more times a coach can create a P300 wave, the better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we obviously do that through the power of a question, and you've landed a good question when people kind of step back and then they take maybe 10, 15 seconds to answer. You've asked a good question in that moment that has obviously sparked that wave, that, what is it, P300?
Yeah.
Yeah, P300 wave. And coaches do that, yeah, through questions, I guess. But is there other ways that one could spark that if they weren't, being asked questions or working with a coach?
Well, you can, Socrates proved that you can take any form of statement, declarative statement, hortatory statement, giving advice, is a hortatory statement. You're exhorting somebody to take a certain path. But Socrates proved you can turn all of those into questions.
Mm.
So, you could make anything a question, but you can give your advice without turning it into a question. Question is, which will work better in the situation. But for example, there are these lenses, like something's making me feel bad. Something is making me feel angry or depressed or anxious or whatever. You could say, why is it making me feel that way?
Mm-hmm.
What's the connection? It's making me feel incompetent. It's making me feel like I'm not a high status person. It's, what is exactly bugging me about that?
Mm-hmm.
Or you can change the lens to, is the universe trying to get me to learn something? And this is the least painful way I can learn it. The universe doesn't, if the universe is all one thing, or if you can even look at it that way, then the universe obviously doesn't want to hurt itself.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore it doesn't want to hurt anything, because everything is part of itself.
Mm-hmm.
So it must be, the universe, if it's conscious, is benevolently in relationship to us, because we're part of it. So it's got a self-interest in being benevolent, helping its parts to feel better, do better. Now, we haven't proven that the universe is conscious, but it may be. Science hasn't disproven it.
Mm-hmm.
And a couple of the best physicists in history,
Mm-hmm.
Wheeler and Hawking,
Mm-hmm.
both talk about the participatory anthropic principle, which says that our consciousness helps create the universe.
Mm-hmm.
These are physicists,
Yeah.
top physicists. So looking at it that way, that the universe and we may be in a partnership here, because we can't rule it out, and it is possible, is the universe trying to teach us something? It's another way of looking at things. How would the thing that's bugging me, if I look at the thing that's bugging me through the lens of the universe trying to teach me something, do I see parts of it that I hadn't seen before?
Hmm. Yeah, I think as well, and I'm not immune to this, right? But I think, sometimes people get caught up. Well, somebody said something to me and it made me feel X, made me feel Y. And obviously through the process of like learning, growth and development, I'm like, nobody can make you feel anything. Only you feel what you feel. And with this lens that you talk about, it's almost, for me, it's like an indication. I think of myself in a bubble, like I'm in my little Natalie energy bubble. And if something happens that makes me feel something, it's almost like an indication of where there's like a little hole in the bubble that needs to be papered over, right? So I I think of it like that. And if something that somebody else has said or done or really upsets you, then like that's an indication to like somewhere that you need to seal your own bubble, if you like.
Right. Exactly. What can you do that would prevent your feeling bad in any situation?
Hmm.
So any situation that makes you feel bad, aha, okay. My next alone space, this is my assignment. Let me write it down. In my next alone space, I want to contemplate, how could I be so vulnerable? Why
Hmm.
would I let myself, why would I let somebody else have this power over me? I don't
Yeah.
want that. I don't want anybody to have that power over me. How do I stop that?
Hmm.
Where's the switch inside? There must be a switch here.
Hmm. Yeah. And I think that it is it again, that's I guess where we started the conversation, which is focusing on yourself and moving that shift in that focus from outside of you to you. And whether you want to do it in the way that I do, which is imagining yourself in a bubble and like highlighting the holes, or any other way, it's an indication. And then you need to do the work. Well, you don't need to, but you and I probably suggest that you do, because when you're in that bubble and nothing can get to you or impact you, then it's kind of an invincible feeling, right? Because it's almost like that water off a duck's back. It's not going to go in.
I've written about this before, but I just on Saturday wrote my next blog post for the Pebbles in the Pond blog, and the title of it is "Be Indomitable."
Mm. Yeah, exactly. Like, what an empowering feeling to know that like nothing that anyone will say or anyone will do will impact you. Like it's almost like a choice, right? And I guess do you believe it's truly possible to not be impacted by anything outside of you?
Yes, including physical torture,
Mm-hmm.
but that's a kind of a very advanced state.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we shouldn't promise that in year one,
Mm-hmm.
but we can get so darn close to that in much less than a year.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So, total immunity, um, which, in India's spiritual tradition is called enlightenment or liberation,
Mm-hmm.
freedom. Um, Nothing left to lose is what Janis Joplin sang. Freedom, just another word for nothing left to lose.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and you can get to that state, but it takes a lot of self-awareness,
Mm-hmm.
and self-awareness doesn't come instantly. But going from 0 to 15 miles an hour in terms of self-awareness is relatively easy. Anyone can do it. A little bit of effort, not a lot of effort. It's not hard to get into the process and to see immediate benefits, and then to get better and better and better at it. And when you get to the flow state in self-awareness, it's a very high state. You actually have yogic capabilities which could be described as magic, but they're really like the ability to have such control over muscles that are normally involuntary tissue that you can learn to take voluntary control of, and involuntary brain processes that you can learn to take physical control over, controlling the amygdala by knowing how to do it. You become so self-aware, you're able to do that. You can turn off pain.
Wow. Yeah. What's popping up for me now is like, I think about a lot of what anybody else thinks, or thinks about you as a person or what you're doing. Like, I don't really have I don't care, right? To be honest. But what, when I'm talking there about switching off completely, I think it's often with the people that you love the most that almost hold the most power over you to feel a certain way. And I know, you think of family or relationships. I think I would say most people are guilty of like outsourcing their power a little bit to the people that they love the most, not because they mean to or they're cognizant of doing that. But I think when we think about love, right, we think about it's being there for the other person and doing things for the other person. And that, I think, is probably the biggest space that people are maybe vulnerable, is for the people that they love the most.
Yeah. If you could be disappointed in them, because trust is a big part of love. And if they do something that's you see as selfish and inconsiderate of you, and they don't even realize it, that's hurtful, and it's disappointing. You've had this pretty picture of them and everything's been perfect and idyllic, but some of it was just an illusion. And now here's the hard reality, and it brings you down. When that happens, what I do is I don't repress the bad feeling. I don't say, "Oh, it's wrong for me to feel that way, so I'm not going to feel that way," because that just goes underground. It becomes part of the subconscious, but it hasn't really gone anywhere. I let myself wallow for a bit and be mad and be disappointed and try to get clear on exactly what the feeling is and exactly why and what type of negativity is it. Is it disappointment? Is it whatever? And then what can I do about it? Well, we've been together for years, and this has happened in the past, and I've kind of just let it float by. After all this time, how can I start this conversation now? I should have started this conversation a long time ago. Maybe I don't need to actually say anything. The other person has already figured out that I'm pissed off. Maybe that sent a kind of a message, kind of a telepathic, or they can figure out why. Maybe they're thinking about it too. And so I'm going to forgive them and see what happens, and then keep tabs on the situation. And if it's not going in the right direction, if this recurs just the same way, just as hurtful, no improvement, I'm going to have to then spend some time figuring out what are the right words to say. I'm going to have to talk about this, and we'll get there, and we'll overcome this, and it'll be better than ever after that. And this is not the end of the world. This is not a door that's shut behind me. This is an endlessly revolving door. We can fix anything.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then by the next morning, usually I wake up and not even pissed off anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I let myself have the rest of the day to be somewhat pissed off, but looking at it from a positive, constructive solution point of view. And then a little bit of forgiveness and reminder of love and a good night's sleep.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
But I do keep an eye on it then and see, if this selfish, disappointing behavior is going to go on, I'm going to have to talk about it and talk about it in a constructive way. I'm going to have to figure out the right words. Maybe I don't have to do that because I've already sent the telepathic messages and the other person is very smart and they know me very well. Maybe I won't have to have a conversation about it, but I'm open to either, whatever happens.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, that's a long answer.
No. So it's almost like feel it, stay in it for a period of time, inquire within, and then communicate, whether it be telepathically or speaking. And that's a way to kind of pull you out of that, or feel better and do better next time, essentially.
Right.
I think it's very linked to expectation as well. I think a lot of when we feel that disappointment or upset, we don't even realize it's an expectation we have put on someone. Our mind has projected that expectation. And I guess expectation kind of leans in a little bit to assumptions, because it's you've expected something and you probably haven't communicated that you've expected something. So you've made an assumption, which has then become an expectation, but you haven't communicated that. So then it leads to a disappointment. So I think there's something interesting there around assumptions, expectations, and how that can lead to these kind of feelings.
Yes, negative feelings do always have something to do with hidden assumptions and expectations, and the comparison between what happened in the real world and this model that you had, model expectation, same thing, of what's supposed to happen.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be like this, but the supposed to may not be based on any actual written contract that was executed by both parties in full knowledge and good faith. It may, as you say, be just an assumption or a group of assumptions that inch their way upward into being certainty. This is why this is outrageous that this could be happening. No, it's not. It's not precluded by the actual real terms and conditions of the agreements that have been made.
Yeah. It's that saying, and it's like there's two sides to every story, and then there's the truth. And I think that's probably a good summary of what we were talking about there with expectations and assumptions. It's there's two sides, and then there's the truth.
Well said, and well timed also, given that we're out of time.
I know. Don't we just ad lib this so good? It's like it just comes out of us, doesn't it? We could just talk about this stuff. It's just, it's just easy. It's flow, right? It's just effortless.
It's a constant process of self-discovery that fortunately doesn't have an ending.
Yeah. Thank God. I know. God, we'd run out of things to talk about. So
we'd be bored.
Yeah, only boring people get bored. So we're definitely not that. We're definitely not that. So no, that's great. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'll get this recording, and then I'll just say to George about doing it, because if we can, I mean, and happy to show him how to do that kind of stuff as well if needed. Because I think it will be useful, and again, we're doing it regularly anyway. We've got the audio, we might as well. And if we get listeners, great. If not, we're still having fun.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And even the whole video from beginning to end.
On YouTube.
Sure.
Yeah.
Why not?
We have it anyway. We might as well maybe just do a different category. And it definitely is making, because this is very me, this is very Natalie, and then but it's not TTM. Like it's I'm too out there for TTM. Like TTM is like it's like a baby of mine. It's not I'm too up here. So yeah.
The Human Effectiveness Institute.
Mm-hmm.
It's, a 501c3 federally tax exempt entity.
Yeah.
I can't, just be completely out there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
even, it's just pretty similar. For many, many years, I did say anything I felt like. And I wrote a book called You Are the Universe that
Mm-hmm.
really exposed my spiritual expectations,
Mm-hmm.
assumptions, theories, hypotheses, whatever you want to call them, in ways that science says, well, you shouldn't be like that.
Mm-hmm.
Scientists shouldn't be like that. So I had to clean up my act for THEI, but not my personal act.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
I wrote a new book called The Theory of Everything. I totally did it the way a scientist would write it. Said this is, not a proven fact, blah, 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 blah. And so very much understand what you're saying about the business part of it, or the organizational part of it, and the free spirit part of it. We need both parts.
Yeah, I think, yeah, it is. It's when because you're most authentically you, like that is the superpower, isn't it? And I think by not sharing this side of me, like, because TTM isn't me, it's its own thing, and like I'm just the one birthing it with other people. But I feel like this feels authentically me, and there's a whole other side to me that some people might connect with, some people might not, but I think it's important to be yourself.
It's hard to get in the flow state without that.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, otherwise you just feel like there's this whole piece in like a closet. It's like it's like you've shoved it in there, and it's like, oh yeah, no, but it's that it's I think when you shine your own light, the right people will find you. They'll authentically find you. And but if you're keeping it locked in a cupboard, then nobody's gonna see it, are they? So time to open the cupboard.
Yeah.
Oh, right, Bill. Well, I'll get going. I'll send the recording over, and I'm excited that we're going to birth a podcast together. This is exciting. So
Very exciting.
Oh, well, have a great rest of your day, and yeah, we'll speak soon.
You too. Lots of love.
Lots of love. Speak later. Bye. 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 Bye.